Welcome. It's Wednesday, October 14th, 2020. Another beautiful fall day here in Windsor Locks. And today we have the honor and the pleasure of sitting down with Mr. Talbot Sturgis, longtime resident of this town who has agreed to share with us some of his life experiences, some of his family history, and perhaps some of his thoughts and ideas about yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Stu, as he is affectionately known to family and friends, was born in 1928 in the town of Chariton, Virginia, and moved here in the year 1960. Stu, thank you for inviting us into your beautiful home, and thank you for allowing us to record this conversation. We're so looking forward to learning more about you, so let's begin. Why not start by sharing your recollections of the earliest years you can recall? Parents, grandparents, siblings, schooling, and anything else you'd like to share about those formative years.
Thank you for coming. I was born in 1928, just before the Big Depression. The stock market crashed in September of 1929. I don't remember that, but I do remember 1931. I was 3 years old, and even though the Depression was there, my father decided I needed a train for Christmas, and he bought me a train, electric train, line electric train, with 4 or 5 cars, and he set it up in our attic. We lived in a farmhouse outside of town. And I remember that train set, and one day we were talking to my mother, and I remember, she says, "You don't remember that?" I said, "I'll describe the stairway going up to the wall, to the upstairs. On each side the wall was finished, a finished wall, and I described it to every detail." She says, "That's exactly right. You do remember." So I know I remembered. Other than that, I don't remember much of anything other than that. So from 1931 until 1934. In the meantime, Depression was still going. My father worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad. He was a station in charge of the station. He was a station agent in charge, and he got laid off because of the Depression. In 1934, they started calling people back, and his seniority, he was pretty far down on the list. By the time they got to him, it was 1934, and they offered him a job as, I don't know what the job entailed, but it was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. That meant we had to pack up and leave from Virginia, which I loved dearly at the time. You know, it's a kind of a place that you love it, but you like it, but you don't want to live there. You know, once you leave it, you don't want to go back because it's too small. So I remember 1934, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I started my first year in school. I went to grammar school there, and we were there till September, till in the spring. I'm not just sure when we left, but in the meantime, my father was recalled back on the Pennsylvania Railroad, and we moved back to Virginia. And that was good, because in Virginia, we lived in a house that my grandfather had built. He was a carpenter back in his day, and he was renowned in the area as one of the best builders there were. Everybody says, they got the best, but my grandfather was one of the best. People would come down from New York City with money and build houses in the waterfront and that kind of stuff, and they all went to get my grandfather. Was William Festus Watson, W.F. Watson. He was the guy that built it, and he didn't take any crap just because they were millionaires. He just had his own way of doing things. Well, the house that I was born in that house on the upstairs front left room, and it was good to get back to it. And we came back to Virginia. It was my grandfather, my grandmother, my father, my mother, and we had a deaf aunt. One aunt was deaf, and she lived with us because she really couldn't make it on her own. So there was 6 of us. In 1936, my brother was born. I had gone to Philadelphia Zoo with my grandmother, which we would do occasionally in the summertime, and we went to the Philadelphia Zoo, and we came to the Stark stork enclosure, and my grandma says, "That's who brings babies." And I said to the stork, "Please bring me a baby." This was in August. When I got home in 2 weeks' time, there he was. The stork came. I said, "Oh my God, that was wonderful, you know." So I remember that very well too. And as my brother got older, as I don't know if you have any younger brothers and sisters, but if you have younger brothers and sisters, sometimes they can be a thorn in your side. Because my mother would say, "Take your brother with you," and it seemed like everywhere I had to go, I had to drag him along. So for a couple of years there, I was kind of sorry I talked to the stork, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I take that back. He did 30 years in the military. He went in 1953, just at the end of the Korean War. He went in the Army 2 years, and he went in the Air Force for 4 years, stationed in Denver, Colorado. Then he went in the Coast Guard, and he retired after 30 years. He was a W-4 warrant officer, so he did his share too. Anyway, back to Virginia. The Depression was still going on, though, even though it was middle 30s, and I was to the point now where I liked ice cream and candy like all kids do. So I used to make the rounds to 5 or 6 people in the house there, bumming nickels, and I'd go up to my grandfather and say, "Papa, give me a nickel." He'd say, "Buddy, I just gave you one last week. What'd you do with that one?" I said, "Papa, I spent it." "Why did you spend it?" So my father says, "Son," he says, let me tell you some advice, good advice. He said, "Everybody needs money. You can't live without money. You got to have money." He says, "You don't have to get a job." He said, "If you want money, you've got to get a job." Well, by 1937, I was 9 years old. I thought, oh. I said, "All right, I'll get a job." So he said, "I'll get you a job if you want." I said, "Get me a job." So he got me a job in 1937, and of course, in that part of Virginia, it's all potato growing in the first part of the year, and in the last part of the year, it's tomatoes. So it's the job it's involved with a farm, and what my job was, I went to work on a potato grader where the farmers would bring in their potatoes they had just dug. They'd dump them in a bin. They'd come up by conveyor belt to a movable movable wire, and the small ones would fall through the holes, and it would grade them by size. And it would come to the end. There's 2 guys there, and they would bag it, and they were wonderful. That's where I worked, and of course I said it's farm work, so the farmers start at daybreak, and they work till sunset. So my job started at 5:30 in the morning, daybreak, and it ended at 8:30 at night. And I got a whole big hour for lunch and a half hour for supper. And I did that Monday through Saturday. Sunday I got to the rest. And I had to ride my bicycle 7 miles to get to the potato grader. So my day started at 4:30 in the morning. But the pay was great. I worked 6 days a week like that, and I got $7. That's more money I ever had in my life at one time. I never had more than 15, 20 cents at a time. So I thought, boy, the world ain't bad after all. It's pretty good, It's a pretty good place to be. So I did that summer. Excuse me. Next summer, I did it the next summer. By that time, it was getting kind of hard. And one day, the boss, in the afternoon, about 1 or 2 o'clock, just after lunch, he said, "Why don't you take an hour off and go back to the store," which was about a quarter mile down the road, "and get an ice cream or something. You take an hour break." I thought, boy, this guy's pretty good. He's treating me pretty good. So I said, all right. So I went down to the store and bought an ice cream or something, whatever it was. And I killed the hour, and I went back. And come to find out, he was hiding me from the child labor law.
Oh,
The inspector was coming around and doing it. And the next time, when the guy came around, he wasn't so generous. He set me under the building, under the platform, to pick up potatoes that had fallen through the cracks. And there they were all rotted and smelly. And that was my job for an hour. So the first time was good. The second time wasn't that good. So now I'm saying to myself, by now I'm 11 years old. I'm getting big. I'm getting to be a big boy. I can do a better job. I look for a better job than this. So I looked for a better job. So I started delivering newspapers. I delivered the Norfolk Ledger Dispatch every day, 75 papers on my bicycle. in that town, practically every house in town, because there's 50, 60 houses in town, a few on the outlying edges. I delivered to everybody that was there, and I did that for two whole years, winter and summer, on the bicycle. And the paper back in those days was 3 cents a copy, and no Sunday papers, Monday through Saturday, so 6 days. So that would be 18 cents a week. On Saturdays, I would collect from the people, and that took me a long time because you got to stop 75 times, blah blah blah. So they would sometimes they'd give me 2 dimes, 20 cents, and they'd stand there wait for the 2 cents change. I couldn't even get 2 cents tip, and once in a while they'd give me 2 cents. But like I said, the inflation, the crash was still going on, and money was still tight. So I did that for 2 years, delivering papers, and I've had outside jobs, and I thought, I'm going to try an inside job. Now I was like 12, I think I was 11 or 12, somewhere thereabouts. I'm going to look for an inside job, so I got a job in a store. A local store was like a AMP, was D. Pender Corporation, a Virginia outfit. I got a job there, working 2 hours after school each day from 4 to 6, and Fridays till 10 o'clock, and then Saturday all day long from 8 to 10 at night. I was putting about 28 hours a week in, and I was getting 30 cents an hour. Man, the world is getting, the bigger you get, the better the world gets, Now I'm making a ton of money, and life was good. Life was good, and I worked that till 1943, and my mother and father moved from Chariton, Virginia, to Salisbury, Maryland, which is near Ocean City, Maryland. And he did that because he was now a relief agent on the Delmarva Division of the Pennsylvania, from Wilmington, Delaware, to Norfolk, Virginia. He could work any station. He was adaptable. He knew, knowledgeable enough to work any station from Wilmington to Norfolk. And we moved to the middle of that peninsula to be closer to whichever the job was. And I did that for a year or so. Then I went to work for Western Auto for a year. Now I graduated from high school in May of '45. I'm still working for Western Auto. The war was going on, and back in those days, it's unlike today. I like to think that, I don't want to say we had the best generation, but everybody believes theirs is the best, and I believe mine was too. But back in my day, people couldn't wait to get in the military to do their part. They really looked forward to joining the military service to do their part. And I was no different. The day I turned 17 in August, I went down to the recruiting station and said, I want to join the Navy. At the time, I had considered going into VMI, Virginia Military Institute, which is, it's second to West Point. And but the draft was still going, and I thought, boy, before long, they're going to have me in the Army, and I don't want to be in the Army, Why why walk when I can ride? So I left the thought of going in the Army and went to the Navy. And so they accepted me. And what do you want to do? I said, I like to fly. I like to be in airplanes. So he put me down, and when they called me in, I was enlisted as a seaman second class. I didn't go as a seaman recruit. I already was one grade up. I got one grade up. I went in as seaman second class CA, which is combat air crewman, which is a gunner on airplanes. Well, by the time I got through all that business and boot camp in Memphis, Tennessee, Memphis was the only entirely air boot camp the Navy had. Everybody that went in the Navy Air, went to Memphis, Tennessee, Naval Air Station, and that's where I was for 5 weeks. Now, like I say, the shooting war was over. The Japs signed a treaty on September 2nd on the Missouri, in Tokyo Bay, and so the shooting war was over. But the war, the military, it goes on till December of '46 to be a World War II veteran. After that, you're no longer a veteran. Up until December 31st, '46, you're a World War II veteran. And excuse me. At the time, like I said, I couldn't wait to get in. And the thought was, back in those days, everybody wanted to do their share. And I'm sure people today want to do their share also, but many people don't have the patriotism that I see that we had in that war. And the reason was, all wars are bad. There's no good war. All wars are bad. But if we had lost, if we had lost that war, today we would be speaking Japanese or German. And that is a fact. That's not a hypothetical theory. That is a fact. We would have lost the war, and everybody knows Hitler's intentions were to kill anybody that wasn't an Aryan, white person, blue eyes, and we were just glad to join the military. And I had several buddies went in, didn't come back. One guy went to Annapolis. He graduated from Annapolis in '49. Navy Air, went to Pensacola, got his wings, and went to Jacksonville Secondary and all that business. By that time, the Korean War started. He was on a carrier, and everybody would say, "Oh, lucky George, lucky George." He got in Annapolis, and everybody was kind of envious of him because he had to go to Annapolis. And he went to Korea, and one of the flights, he never came back. So George wasn't so lucky after all. So I had several friends that didn't make it, and I was happy to be a part of the military. And I know when I was marching along, we would be marching to the mess hall for supper or breakfast. Discharged veterans waiting to be discharged on the side. "You'll be sorry." And I said, "No, I'm glad to be here." I really was glad to be there. And at that Naval Air Station, at that boot camp for air, we didn't do the normal, HUP 2, 3, 4 thing, and how to fire a 45 and all that stuff. It was all aircraft identification, and from any Air Force, from Austria, from Lithuania, whoever had airplanes, we had to know the silhouette coming from any angle, because as an aircraft gunner, you only got about 10 seconds to make up your mind to shoot or not to shoot, and you didn't want to shoot your friend down. So as the war turned out, like I said, the shooting war was over. Now you got 10 million veterans, all of them going to come out on the outside and set the world on fire and get a big job, But there's no job because all the places that employed making military stuff all shut down, and there was no jobs, and a lot of them came back in. I knew a lieutenant came back in, a pilot came back in as a seaman first class. That's the best he could get. And it was quite a time to be in the military, and I enjoyed it. Didn't do much flying, because they cut back on those that were in. Those of us that were still in, the Navy cut down to just over 1 million. We don't have much more than 1 million now, I guess. And they also cut the funds, and we call them flight skins. You only get flight skins if you fly 4 hours a month or more. Well, you are lucky if you got 2 hours a month, and it would sometimes take you 2 months to get a set of flight skins, which gave you 50% more of your pay. And I liked that extra money, and I thought, well, I went from boot camp to Jacksonville, Florida, Naval Air Station. I got there in the first week of 1946. I don't remember the exact date. And Jacksonville was where all the Navy pilots went to get their secondary training, flight training. And every one of them thought they were Major Bong, who was a World War II hero, shot down 40 planes or whatever. Every one of them thought they were Major Bong. As soon as they would take off, they would go into some spectacular maneuver. And every day there was an incident of some kind every day, because they were all maybe got 20 hours of flight time under their belt, but they thought they were hot rods. And every day something would go wrong, and they put out a base paper, and in there was a little cartoon called Grandpa Pettibone. Older guys may remember that. And in that newspaper, every week when it came out, they would have what the most spectacular accident of that week that had happened and what not to do. And one of them I remember distinctly. It was involved a TBM bomber, it's a torpedo bomber, the same one that the president shot down in World War II there, Bush. It had a torpedo on it and a gunner, had a gunner underneath and a ball turret behind the pilot. And they were going to take off, and it has no tricycle landing gear. It's got tail, so you can't see over the Callan. So what do? You go to the right, and you look to, you zigzag so you can look over the Callan. And you zig down the strip until you get to the end of the runway and you wait your turn. Well, this guy either forgot or didn't know it. He kept right on coming without looking. And he crashed into the plane in front of him, and that big old propeller on that airplane ate that airplane all the way up to about a foot behind that ball turret before it finally killed the engine. And the guy survived. He never got hurt. But, he was just lucky that he didn't get hurt. So that made the newspaper that week, and I saw a couple planes crash, and it was, I thought, man, this, a guy could get hurt here, You got to be careful. And while I was there, in April of '46, I'd been there maybe a couple of months, going to school, learning how to, I was an aviation ordnance. I learned how to built up ammunition, put it in the canister, load it in the wings of the planes, 6 guns and one, a couple canisters. Each gun got several canisters, and I was proficient in the 45 pistol. We learned to take it apart blindfolded. And a couple guys said, why are we going to do this in the dark, blindfolded? Suppose you're in the jungle and your gun misfires. What are you going to do, put on a flashlight and draw fire? No, you're going to do it in the dark. So we had to be able to do a field strip of 45 and put it back together in the dark, which I could do at the time. And I also could repair 50 caliber machine guns, 20 caliber machine guns, and I worked a couple of times on a 20 millimeter, not often. I just, not more than looked at that. And an interesting part of one of my jobs was we upheld those planes that were flying at the time. Like I say, I did very little flying, no money. And one job that came up that I really enjoyed was bore sighting the 6 guns on these fighter planes, like on the F-4F, F-6F planes. And you bore sight them so the bullets from all 6 guns converge about 1,000 yards. And that's your effective distance, 1,000 yards at the time. You hold your fire till you're 1,000 yards, which is a half a mile from the enemy. And when you shoot him, he gets hit with 6 guns, and they're firing 10 rounds a second. That's 60 rounds a second. He's getting hit with if you hit him. So you don't pull the trigger and hold it. You just make it in spurts, because if your aim is right, he's going to go down with 60 hits. He's not going to survive. And if you kept your finger on the trigger too long, the guns would get hot, and you'd ruin the guns, and we would have to come back and re-barrel the gun. You have to put new barrels in, because they just couldn't take it. Plus, if the ammunition we put in the average plane, I'm not sure exactly the amount of time, but if there was enough bullets to sustain between 2 and 3 minutes of firing, closer to 2 minutes than 3. So in 3 or 4 second spurts, you had a lot of spurts. And if you miss him, why keep firing? When he's in your crosshair, you hit him then. So that was fun. So bore sighting these planes was interesting. You jack the plane up in a flight attitude, and you put you take the breech out, and you had a little periscope thing that you put in the breech, and you look through it, and you see the crosshairs, and in the abutment in the back there, you had paper drawings with 6 circles, and you had a jack bolt that would jack the rear of the gun up or down or left or right to where the crosshairs were right on the crosshairs on that paper. And when he did, of course, that paper was closer than 1,000 yards, so you had to hit that target. And if you got that right, all 6 guns would converge at 1,000 yards. And this guy, the Jap Zero was going to go down. And that was interesting. When I got done, what made it interesting, when I got done doing that, you built up enough ammo for 6 guns, 15 rounds in each gun, which is about a second and a half, 10 rounds a second. And in a second half, you fired 90 rounds. 15 times 6, is that 90? Yeah, it's 90. Mm-hmm. And you go inspect how well your bore sight was. And most times it would be pretty good, because the mistake would be in whoever mathematically figured out where the target's going to be, which I didn't do that. That was above me. I couldn't do that. So that was interesting. And about April of 46, of course, everybody was leaving the military, and they were forgetting about the war, about what people had done. The military was being, beginning of being forgotten. So to bring the Navy, the military, especially the Navy, back to mind, Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, who was the Supreme Commander of all forces in the Pacific in World War II, from 44 on, he was the Admiral. He said, we got to do something to bring the Navy back to people's minds. And what can we do? So he talks to a guy, it was Butch something. I can't remember his last name, because this was in 46. And they talked it over, and they decided to put on some kind of air show and for the public. So what they did, they formed this. Butch became the first commanding officer, and at Jacksonville in April 46, and they took 3. He selected 3 other pilots. They all had shot down. They were all combat pilots. They all had kills in World War II. So they weren't novices. They were the real McCoy. They got those guys, and there was 4 of them, and they were flying F-4F Grumman's at the time, which was the big plane in World War II. And the only thing they knew was how to shoot down planes. So the show they put on involved a sham battle between them and the Japanese aircraft. So the very first show, they practiced every Sunday. They shut the field down from 2 o'clock in the afternoon till 4, and these guys would practice. They'd take off, like in unison, which is kind of dangerous. And what prompted that, they had an SNJ, a North American SNJ, painted up to look like a Japanese Zero. And he would come over, supposedly attacking the base, and these guys are attacking him. They'd take off, and they'd all go up, and they'd dive down one at a time on this Jap Zero, and then you could see the puffs of smoke, because they had blank shells in there. You could actually see the puffs of smoke, because it was close. It was very close to you. And the Jap Zero he would wobble his wings, and then he'd smoke where he'd release a smoke bomb, and he shot, and then he'd fly over, and that was the show. The whole show didn't last 15, 20 minutes, if that long. And they became the Blue Angels. And not many guys in this world today can say they saw the first show, they saw the Blue Angels training to see the first show of the Blue Angels from then until now. And that was in April of 46. I think they put their first show on in June or July. And I don't recall where it was, but it was somewhere local. It may have even been Jacksonville, I don't recall. And about that time, Grumman Aircraft, which made the F-4F on Bethpage, Long Island, came out with a better plane towards the end of the war, the F-6F. A better version of the F-4, faster, everything was better about it. So these guys they flew to Bethpage, Long Island, and picked up 3 F-6Fs and bought them back. That became their airplane then. That was in July or August. And they were now putting on shows pretty regular. They were high in demand because, nobody knew what people did during the war. Here you see what's happening. You see what they were doing in the war. They actually were shooting people, had shooting down airplanes. And in their act, they would dive down one after the other, And in September of that year, something happened. I don't know what happened, but one of the guys failed to pull out, and he went right on in. And the first Blue Angel died in September '46 in an F-6F airplane. He just never survived. He never pulled up. But it didn't stop him. They kept going, and from that day till this day, there's been over 20 guys have died. I forget just how many have died. In one episode, I do remember, there was, I think, 3 died at one time. And if you've ever, well, how can I put it? He talks them through this. The leader, he's constantly talking. I'm talking to you, I'm making a turn. When I count 3, I'm going to make a turn. 1, 2, 3. He's talking to, because how else can you be precision? And they follow him. They don't look and see where they are. They just follow what he says. And he miscalculated. When they make a big loop and come over, they all fly together and come over. And when they pull out, they were too low. Didn't have enough land. And 3 of them went in. The 3 went in, and the last guy had more time. He didn't go in, and 3 got killed at one time. So it was a hairy maneuver, but it was great. So I enjoyed Jacksonville very much. So I was there till September, October. I guess it was '46, and I got transferred to Key West Naval Air Station, just 150 miles. Well, from Jacksonville, 500 miles from Jacksonville, 150 from Miami, and it was good. I thought that's great, and another guy and myself were transferred down there. A guy named Joe Patton, and he was a great diver. He went to Ohio State University, and back in that time, Ohio State University was the place to go. It was like UConn for basketball. It's the place to go if you're a diver. You go to Ohio State because they've got it. And Joe had gone to Ohio State, but he went in the Navy to avoid the draft just like I did. And he and I were good buddies. And in Key West, I'm thinking, I'm trying to think, Key West. Joe and I one day decided, he said, let's go over to Waukulla Springs. I said, what the heck's in Waukulla Springs? It's a little town about 15 miles south of Tallahassee. And he said, they got a great diving platform over there. I want to go over and practice diving. So we hitchhiked from Jacksonville to Tallahassee, about 150 miles. And in those days, everybody would pick up sailors because it was serving, because that was their part of, helping out the military. So we got to Waukulla Springs, and there was this 10-meter board, 10-meter platform, wasn't a diving board, a 10-meter platform, 33 feet. And we put on our bathing suits. He said, let's go up and dive off, and jump off. Yeah, okay, so I come up to 33 feet. And here up there didn't look too high. When I got up to the top and looked down, oh my God, that's forever. I said, Joe, I don't believe I'm going to jump off of here, So I went back down, the ladder way. And I said, I hate the chicken oven. I'm chicken. But he went to the edge, turned his back to the water, and just on his toes. He stood there and he composed himself, and he did backflips and all kinds of maneuvers to hit that water, and the water splashed about 1.5 feet. Perfect. I said, that guy's got it, And that reminds me, when I was at Jacksonville, I hadn't yet, before I left, go to Key West. One of the things we did at Jacksonville, I forgot to say, you had to learn how to abandon ship. You put on a set of whites, and you jump off of a 27-foot platform, which was pretty doggone high. That's about almost twice the size of a telephone pole. And you put on whites because you'd have on a uniform on the ship. And everybody went up there, and again, it didn't look high, but you get up top and look down, and it looked forever. And when I get to the edge of the thing, I said, that was an instructor there. I said, I don't believe I'm going to be able to jump off here, but I'm in the air. This guy pushed me. You're going to go. There's no sense that you can't do it. You're going to go. And you hit the water. Now you got to swim twice the length of that pool, there and back, twice, with your white uniforms on, and it's a drag. It's trying to It's trying to, you're pulling so hard, you're panting, and they don't care how you did it as long as you didn't, as you made it. And I found that if I lay on my side, on my back, on my side, I can like side paddle and just barely move my feet. I could stay afloat forever. And I discovered that from that episode. So it was no problem from then on for me to do that. But the hard part was when you do the 2 lengths of the pool. Now you have to do two lengths sideways underwater in case of fire. And in case of the burning fuel, and you come up, you put your hands up first and you splash the water to kick the water away from you, so the fire, you come up with and not be on fire. That was pretty hard to learn that. And the crowning part of that training was, they called it the Dempster, did something, the Doopster Dempster. It wasn't Doop, something Dempster. I can't remember the name for sure. Something Dempster, the Doodle Dempster. And what that was, it was a cockpit of an airplane on a ramp, and went way down into the pool. And you get on that cockpit, you put your seat belts on, all that crap that you got on, and when you're all set, they release it, you're underwater in that cockpit, and you got to learn to get out of there underwater. And it was, if you don't take a deep breath, you start to panic pretty soon. And of course, there's instructors there on either side in case you do panic, they could get you out of there. But we all got through that. That was pretty good. And one of our instructors at the pool was a guy, God, I can't remember his name now. He was a championship diver. He was it. And he had come in the Navy, and they had signed him to the pool because of his previous experience. And he was so good in the 1948 Olympics, he won the gold medal for diving in the 1948 Olympics. And again in 1952, he won the gold medal. I just wish I could think of his name. And he was putting on a show after he left the Navy. He was somewhere down in southern Connecticut, I don't know, in Stamford or somewhere down in that area. And he was getting prepared to put on the show. Well, the platform was 33 feet up in the air, and going up that platform, something happened, and he fell, and he got killed. Around 1957, he got killed. And I was sorry to hear that, because he was a great guy. But back to Key West. While I was in Key West, Harry Truman, President Harry Truman, I should say, President Harry S. Truman, made Jacksonville, Key West, his summer White House. And he'd gone down in February, but now I'm there. I got there in September, October. It's now November, and he came down again in November. I'm going to get to see the president. So he came down to Boca Chica Field, which is 3 islands up. That's where the Naval Air Station is. I was at a place, the seaplane base. We only had two planes there at the time, and he wouldn't fly in that. He flew in a big. His plane was a big 4-engine TWA airplane. TWA, I forget the name of it too. Anyway, I'm going to get to see Harry Truman. So we all. He comes to the main gate. We're all standing, and I'm as close to Harry Truman as I am to that fireplace right there. And he looked just the same as he did in person as he did in the newsreels, you know. And that was quite an episode to see him at the little White House. He stayed at the submarine base, which is on the other side of the island. And that's the only time I got to see him that time. But I did see him one other time. He came back. He came there many times, maybe 15, 20 times. Every 6 months he would come down there. And in 1948, I have now been transferred to Boca Chica Field, which is, like I said, on you got Stock Island and Boca Chica Island, Key, and he flew in again, and now they're really going to put on a show for him. And in the Navy, when somebody important comes aboard a ship, they have what they call side boys. That you may Your father may have spoke of that, I don't know. But side boys, they put people on either side of the gangway where you could, and when he comes, they blow the boats, to pipe him aboard. And they did the same thing at Boca Chica, but they did it from his airplane all the way to the main gate of the field, because he was going to Key West itself. And it took everybody on the base to be side boys for the admiral, for the president. And I was standing about 3 guys from this telephone pole, and they took a aerial photograph, and I got that picture somewhere. I got an arrow, me. I knew where I was, and I'm in the picture. Well, there he is too, and I saw him again.
Oh,
and each time, he had some famous admiral with him. I can't remember which came first, but I saw 3 admirals. I saw Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, which is the man from World War II. He was in charge of all the Pacific. He was a top dog in the Pacific. He was it. I saw him in person. I saw Ernest J. King, which is a guy that was in Washington, D.C. that never left Truman's side never left the president's side the whole war. He was there, a whole war. I saw him in person. And I saw a third guy. I'm not sure if it was either Admiral Spruance or it could have been Leahy. I'm foggy. Because it's like I said, this is, 50, 60 years ago. But it was exciting to see those guys. And after that, I just maybe collect my thoughts. Give me a second.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that about ended up Jacksonville and Key West. So now it's time to move on. I went to Corpus Christi, Texas, and was there for a while, only for a month or so. And they moved me from there to Memphis, Tennessee, Naval Air Station. So I was back to where I went to boot camp. So I was in Memphis for a while. I was in Memphis for about 10, 11 months. And while in Memphis, on Memorial Day parade, May 30th, 1948, the Navy put on a big parade. They had a big parade, and the Navy participated in the town's parade. And in that parade, we had, I don't know how many guys, it must have been 2,000 sailors. I was just one of the 2,000. But I marched in a parade with Admiral Bull Halsey. I was in a parade with Bull Halsey. Not many people can say that. I marched with a World War II Admiral, Bull Halsey. And that was great. And they gave us the rest of the time after the parade was ended up, whatever time that was, by noontime, we got the rest of the weekend off. that was our reward. So now I'm in Memphis, and nothing exciting went on in Memphis. We did have a barracks burned down while there, and they were all wood, and the Navy is hot for cleanliness. And every week you'd have a cleanup day. I forget what day it was. I think it was Friday, if I remember. And you'd wax the the floors, and buff them. And when you hit the deck with a wax swab, it would get up on the sides, and all that. So it was loaded with wax. And once that fire got going, they couldn't stop it. And 2 guys died in that fire. And they were very particular on fire after that. At that time, Memphis was being ruled by, I won't say the mafia, but hoodlums, the crooks, politicians. And the guy's name was Crump, Boss Crump. Boss Crump ran Tennessee, primarily Memphis. And the admiral at that time was named Stump, Felix B. Stump. And it was Crump and Stump, And I remember, even to this day, the field in Memphis is Crump Stadium to this day. And Kefauver, remember?
Oh, yeah, Estes.
Kefauver came along, he cleaned up Tennessee. He kicked Crump out. He's the guy who cleaned up and threw Crump out after all them years. He cleaned up the state and got rid of Crump. So I was there to see all that evolution went on. And Navy is always hot for safety. There's no such thing as an accident. It's an incident that got out of control. And, I'll talk about the thresher later, but something small can happen. If it gets out of control, it becomes quote an accident. And while there, the captain was hot for car accidents. He wanted to prevent car wrecks, and he had a big campaign on drinking and driving and falling asleep and all that stuff. And what prompted that? There were 6 guys coming back from Memphis, and the base is like 10, 12 miles north of the town, and it's like almost like a levee. It's built up through lowlands, and at one point there, the guy fell asleep and ran off the road just before a bridge, and he became airborne and hit the abutment on the other side, killed all 6 guys. So the captain bought that wreck from the insurance company, put it in the back of a flatbed truck, and drove that thing all through the base every day, all day long. And said 6 of your shipmates died in this vehicle. And it was a mess, and that was impressive. Mm-hmm. That was impressive. So Memphis. Other than that, there wasn't much else I can think of that went on there. We just did our regular job, of supporting airplanes and aviation ordnance. That's what I did. Anything to do with ordnance, that was my job. And one time I thought, well, I never got to be in combat, and I was kind of sorry, and at the same time I was kind of glad, because the life of common air crewman in those days was brief. I mean, if you lived to be a minute in combat, you were lucky. I know Torpedo Squadron 8, Ensign Gay, was in Life magazine. That's why I remember this. I remember reading the story. Out of 8 torpedo planes, only 1 survived, and all of them died. Because you're carrying steady flight, you can't veer because you're going to fire a torpedo, so you can't wobble. You just and only Ensign Gay survived. So I thought I want to at least sit in one of those turrets on a TBM. So it's a ball turret, it's about 2 foot across, got 250 caliber machine guns. So you can come in, get in either 2 ways, from down below, which is laborious, getting up through all that maze of pipe and stuff, or you come into a hatch that's about that big around on the side, and it's hard. You put your one leg in first, then you put your body in, and you gotta. It's like putting on a suit, a shirt. You gotta put that thing on. You don't get into it. You put it on. And I sat there and I shut the hatch, and I sat there. You sit there with both knees. It's up. Your knees are up beside your ears, and you're sitting back in a cradle. And when Bush's plane got shot down, those guys didn't get out because the plane don't stay afloat long. And the guy, especially, they got underneath. He's the first to die. And I thought, man, try to get out of this plane. Unless you're on land, you ain't going to make it. And I just wanted to throw that in. I had to have that experience. Mm-hmm. And while at Jacksonville, one of my flights, wasn't that many of them, but I did fly one time in a PBM, patrol bomber, Martin, PBM, a big 2-engine gull-wing airplane. I flew from Jacksonville Naval Air Station to Norfolk Naval Air Station, and in that seaplane, and I made a seaplane takeoff and a seaplane land, the only one I ever made. That was an experience too, because you're bumping, all of a sudden it just smooths out, you're airborne, and it's just the opposite. Coming in, it's smooth, and all of a sudden it's like running over a dirt bumpy road. You're just rocking and rolling, and that was exciting. And Norfolk, back in those days when the war was still going on, my grandparents lived on my father's side lived in Portsmouth, Virginia, which is just across the Elizabeth River from Norfolk, and we would visit them quite often from the ferry from Cape Charles, which is down near the tip. Took 3 hours across the bay, and you come into Norfolk. They had a submarine net. A big tugboat would open up the submarine net, and we would come in, they'd shut the net. And when you go inside that anchorage, you could see 30 or 40 ships, aircraft carriers, battleships, every ship you can conceive of. And they need a long swing because they could swing, had to have 1,000 feet on either direction because they were almost 1,000 feet long. It was a huge port, and I remember that very well too. I had a cousin. It was on the USS Lexington, the first Lexington, CV-2. It was the first aircraft carrier built as a carrier from the keel up. The CV-1 was a Langley. That was an old tanker they converted. So the CV-2, the Lexington, was the first aircraft carrier built as a carrier. And my cousin went on it at the onset in 1927 or 28 when it was commissioned, and he was on it the entire time of the life of that ship. In those days, in the military, in the Navy especially, you didn't transfer you around because there was no money. I mean, why transfer you from one ship to the other? You were on this ship, stay there. And he was on that ship from 1927 to the Battle of the Coral Sea in May of 1942. And the Lexington, the USS Lexington CV-2 was sunk. And my cousin survived the sinking. And by now he was a warrant officer, and they abandoned the ship, had a big list on it. They go to the low side, and he had to go down ropes. He said, as an officer, he hadn't done any real work for quite a while. His hands weren't tough like they used to be. And he got near the water, he just dropped into the water. He couldn't go all the way down. So he survived the sinking of the Lexington. But going back even further back, before Pearl Harbor, I had a cousin, by marriage. I'm trying to think of his name. His last name was Sowers. Wallace Lee Sowers. I'm going back to 41 now. Wallace Lee Sowers was just a cousin by marriage, no blood relation. He went in the Navy in 1941 in January, because jobs were, they weren't that plentiful. And he went to Norfolk, and he got a destroyer. He was on a destroyer. By now the war was going on in Europe, and we're giving the Russians Lend-Lease convoys. They're convoying 30, 40 ships to Lend-Lease to Murmansk, and they would send U.S. destroyers to protect them. And my cousin's destroyer was one of the ships. So on October 31st, 1941, that's 5 weeks before Pearl Harbor, the USS Reuben James was his ship. You've heard the song. Mm-hmm. He was on the Reuben James. And you go look, if you want to, on a computer, you check, you'll see his name is Wallace Lee Sowers. And he died. He was one of the 168 people who went down with that ship. He got hit on the starboard side near the bow and just tore a 20-foot hole in it. And those ships, they're just, they can't hold that much water. It went down within 12 minutes. And the water up there near Iceland is so cold that you can't survive the water anyway. It's just cold. It's just too cold. So Wallace Lee went down with that ship. And like I said earlier, I had another cousin, blood cousin, that survived Iwo Jima. He survived the Battle of Iwo Jima. Very lucky guy, because during the war, 4,000 Marines died. It took a long time to get Iwo Jima, and over 4,000 Marines died on that during that episode, and he survived. He was a lucky man. And all wars are bad. I may have said this before, but like I said before, if I did repeat, I'm sorry. If we had lost that war, we would be speaking Japanese or German today. We would be speaking. There's no doubt about it. And all wars are bad. If we lost Korea, whatever, World War I, it was over there. But this one was here. And we had to win this war. And we did. And thank God we did. And I had quite a few friends that didn't make it. I went in, after aviation, I was in aviation for 4 years. In 1949, I was at Boca Chica Field, Key West. They put out a call for submen because, like I said, a lot of guys were leaving, and The submarine service is entirely 100% volunteer. There's nobody drafted to submarines. If you don't want to be there, they don't want you. They want you to be there before they'll accept you. And you got to go through all kinds of psychological tests. And I used to bite my fingernails bad. I even let my fingernails grow in case they checked my fingernails. They'd see that I wasn't nervous, you know. So I put a request in to go to submarine school, and by God, they selected me. So I get on a train. I ride from Miami to New London. I got New London in May of '49, and it was quite a change from Key West because you see all these submarines, and I went through sub school, and I really wanted to be there. And the guy asked me, why do you want to be here? Because I just love the idea of being there. I just want to be here. I want to be a part of it. And it had a great fame. World War II submarines is the only part of all the military, everybody that took the war to the Japs, took the war over there for the first 6 months of the war until we got together again, it was a hazardous place to be because the submarine service also had the highest number of deaths. The ratio, 25% of all submarine force died, didn't come back, and they lost 52 subs during the war to the war, and 3 by operational, 55 subs, and my mother and my wife later asked me, how do I know when you'll come back? I said, you won't. If I come back, I'm here. If I don't come back, I'm not coming. There's no way, because you're on patrol, nobody knows where you are, and you get torpedoed or you get depth charge or whatever, you end coming back. They don't even know where you are. And even to this day, there's still submarines that they're still finding. There was the one submarine, I can't remember the name of it, famous skipper. He was leading a number of kills for the Japanese, but he's taking chances. But that's what the Navy wants, because that's what you have to do. You have to take chances. You can't be a pennyweight and sit back, and you got to go look for the enemy. You can't have them come. You got to go look for them guys. And he did. He would search them out, and on one of his patrols, I think it was about the 7th or 8th patrol, which was fantastic to make that many patrols and survive. He didn't make the last patrol, and they didn't know where he was. They knew a general area in the South China Sea, but they knew exactly where he was. He could be anywhere within 1,000 miles. And his 2 sons, later, they grew up and became very wealthy. And on their own, they hired a company to search for their father's submarine, with some underwater apparatus, listening devices, whatever they had, submersible vessels they could send down with lights, yeah. And they found their father's submarine. They didn't disturb it because it's a national cemetery. Mm-hmm. It's got 100 men still inside, but they found their father's burial place. Wow. And I thought that brings tears to my eyes thinking about those guys that didn't come back. Mm-hmm. And after a while, I went to my submarine. I went through sub school, and I placed in the top quarter, and so I got my pick of where I wanted to go: San Diego or New London or Key West or wherever. So I picked New London because I'm here. Why not stay here? So I got the USS Half-Peak, SS-352. It was a World War II sub, the last one made on a World War II contract. It never got decommissioned until '46, but it was the last one built on a World War II contract. Everything after that was canceled. So I got my orders. Got to walk down from the upper base of New London down to the piers, go through a gate, the guards there and all that stuff, and walk along the pier. I'm looking for 352, and I see it 4 or 5 piers down. I walk down the pier and identify myself. Who are you? Who do you want? I show him my stuff. I give him my orders. Okay, he says, okay, come aboard. He says, use the after battery hatch and that'll put you to the mess hall. He said, I'll have somebody meet you down there. So I went to the after battery hatch, down past the sail, and I dropped my bag down in the hatch, and I'm climbing straight down. It's like, like a straight down ladder, only about 2.5 feet across. It's like a tube. And when I got to the deck, and I turned around and looked, I'm in a mess hall, and the radio was going. The RBO, that was what it was called. The RBO was going, and it said, "Flash, USS Caccino, SS 240, whatever the number was, had exploded and sank in the Arctic Ocean last night at 2 a.m." That's what greeted me within 10 minutes of being on that ship.
Wow.
That was what came across the radio. I wasn't even on 10 minutes. I said, holy mackerel, I left aviation, which was dangerous, and I'm greeted by a submarine just got lost. So it was the USS Caccino, and I can go into the story about what happened to that. The Caccino, this was in August, in the summertime in the Arctic, north of Norway, up north of Murmansk area, and even in the summertime it's still cold, but it's not like in the wintertime. And they had a battery fire. Well, that's bad. When you have any fire on a submarine, any catastrophe in a submarine is bad, because there's nowhere to go, there's no place to help you, there's nobody to help you because you're by yourself. Everybody's your enemy, including your friend, because they've had in World War II a B-24 out of Roosevelt Roads, Puerto Rico, sank the USS Dorado, brand new submarine, thought it was an enemy. Anyway, the Caccino had a fire, and it's getting out of control because they can't get into the compartment to disconnect the battery, where the battery disconnects are. So one battery was discharging to the other. Now, when I say a battery, I don't mean I mean 252 tons of battery was discharging to another 252 tons of battery. It's like 252 cells. They're about 2 foot by 2 foot, about 6 foot high. That's a cell. There's 252 of them make one battery. And one battery was discharging to the other battery at a terrific rate, causing hydrogen gas to be generated. And it would blow, pow! And every so often it would blow. And every time it blows, it's destroying the submarine. So they got to get off that submarine. It's going to sink. It's going to sink. They can't control it. So the other sub with them was the USS Tusk, and they couldn't come alongside. They did come alongside. I'm sorry. Let me think. I don't want to get my story straight. The Caccino, yes, they came alongside. There's more. This happened more than once. That's why I get the Caccino. The USS Tusk came alongside in the summer in the Arctic Ocean, and you have huge swells. And it took a masterful piece of seamanship for the USS Tusk to come alongside the Caccino, and he did. They'd roll together and bang the hulls. And when they did, they would drop the gangway across, and 4 or 5 guys would run across. And then when it would fall apart, they'd pull it up, and they'd drop it, and then 4 or 5 guys, and they got everybody from the Caccino to the USS Tusk, all topside. And this is in the summertime, and even then it's cold, and big wave, and a mammoth wave hit the Tusk and washed everybody over the side. Well, now they're pulling people back on like pulling tuna fish. Everybody came back with 8 guys. 8 guys, they never found 8 guys. 8 guys died, they never got them. But the executive officer on the Caccino decided if we start an engine in the engine, which is right next to the burning compartment, that's where I worked. If we start an engine, we can burn the hydrogen gas as it's being generated and prevent explosions. And then with a mask on, we can go in and open the disconnects. So they get an engineman, which would be my job. I wouldn't have got to be my job. They get one engineman, and the executive officer go down there to the engine room. He starts the engine, and the exec now goes to the hatch, and he opens the hatch. When he did, the pressure inside that compartment was burning, blew that hatch open, and a tongue of fire come on and engulfed him in a big, 10-foot flame, and everything burned off him except his belt and his shoes. He was burnt severely bad, and he's just laying there moaning and groaning, and now the engine is running away on hydrogen gas. The guy puts the throttle down to kill the fuel, but it's running on hydrogen gas, and he can't stop it. And it's gaining speed. It's going to rupture and blow up. He's got to get out of it. He's got to take the exec to it. He's burnt bad. And he goes over to the guy and says, "No, just leave me. Don't touch me. Just leave me." "No, I'm not leaving you." And he grabbed the guy under his arms, and got to be awful painful right there. And he drug him to the rear of the ship, and he pulled him up a ladder and got him off of there. He survived all that burning. He survived.
Wow.
And very lucky. His name was Wright, Lieutenant Commander Wright. I remember his name. He survived. So eventually, when they abandoned it, all the hatches opened, the Cachino eventually sank. But 8 guys did die. So that was my introduction to the submarine service. Okay, well, while undergoing schooling at sub-base before I got my submarine, they have what they call an Event 1000 at the time. They don't have it now, but back in those days, Event 1000 occurs if a submarine is overdue and doesn't come back on time. And all available craft go looking for it, where the known area, pinging for it and whatever. And they surprise, they'll pick a submarine, and you don't know about it till you're at sea. And then you go down and somewhere in Long Island Bay, which the sub I was on, it happened to be, there was a sub I was on picked that day, and we went out in Long Island Sound and went down to the bottom and settled on the bottom. Just shut everything down where there's no noise, they can't hear nothing. Now they got to find us. And they did, they found us. They ping, it's 312 foot long steel, and you ping, you get returns, they know what to listen for. Well, I decided to volunteer for nuclear power. I wanted to try nuclear power submarines. That was the latest thing, and as you can see from my past, I've done a little bit of everything. So I volunteered for nuclear power, and I went to school, nuclear power school, and it takes 6 months in the classroom, 2 years at MIT, and 2 years equivalent MIT, and then 6 months at a prototype, which was at Combustion Engineering in Windsor. That's where I was sent, and I went through the training, and because I did fairly well, they kept me on as an instructor. And I was going to be there for 2 more years, instructing newly arrived recruits. And I was in charge of everything that had to do with safety as far as radiation and nuclear inside the submarine, and combustion was in charge of everything outside of the submarine hull. So one Sunday morning, the phone rang about 10 o'clock in the morning, and it was the executive officer of the nuclear place over there. He said, get your A in here immediately. He said, some of your guys have contaminated my whole site with radiations everywhere. I jumped in my car, got over there, and I was in senior guy, like I say. I don't know how many guys worked for me, 5, 6, 7, 10, whatever. And I took some samples, and it was so widespread. I said to his name was Sawyer, Lieutenant Sawyer, I said, there's no way in the world my guys have done this. I said, this looks like nuclear fallout. Now, this is back in '61. And, there wasn't many A-bombs that had been tested at that time. There's Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but that was about it. And he said, clean up my sites. And I said, let me send somebody to Springfield and somebody to Hartford on a QT and have them take some samples and we'll bring them back to prove this is widespread. Never mind, just clean up my place. So we had officer trainees. I'd take one officer and 10 enlisted people and make a group. And I had each group would go clean up a building. Inside, outside, just clean it up, spick and span. So we had a chart in the office where this was all happening, And Mr. Wassam, who was in charge of combustion, he was there. E.F. Wassam was there. And everywhere that we had a sample was above 100 microcuries, which was the limit, was in red. And everything was red. It's like you take a red paintbrush and paint this thing red. And I said, can't you see this is too widespread and too even? It's not a bucket of water, it's fallout. So all that day, all that night, the next day, I don't know, sometime in the afternoon, Mr. Wassam says to Lieutenant Sawyer, and he's in charge of combustion, he says, you know, Buzz, he says, this is beginning to look like fallout. I thought you'd never see it. And right away, it all stopped. You know, all the work stopped. And we had a QT after that. Everybody had a talk. What can we do better? I said, I'll learn one thing about it. This is fallout, and if this country ever has a real catastrophe, we're going to be in a hell of a mess, because we weren't prepared. Even in a nuclear facility, we weren't prepared, because we ran out of stuff to do the cleaning. Ran out of couldn't take any more samples. Ran out of everything. And I said, another thing, I said, I'll add, you got the cleanest 6 acres in all the United States. You got the cleanest 6 acres there is, or whatever size it was. And, you know, you never get a thank you or well done. But the thing was, what really galled me, this was outside the hull. This was not my responsibility. It was a guy's name, I won't call his name, because it was his responsibility, but he shunned the job and dumped it all on me. And that's why Sawyer gave me the job. But he was supposed to be outside, and I'm inside, because we had no contamination inside. It was all outside. But about, I don't know, sometime later, I can't remember, it was a week, or 2 weeks, or a month, whatever it was, I can't recall now. But Russia finally put out, you know, they deny everything, but they finally admitted, yeah, we just dropped an atomic weapon 600 miles north of Murmansk, 100 megaton nuclear bomb, and we were getting the fallout. And the principal fallout from a nuclear bomb is iodine-131. That's the isotope. The short term, that's quick, is iodine-131. Got a 3.5 hour half-life. It's gone in half of it. And the long term is strontium-90, and that's what I was getting. It's fallout, and that's what they were getting. And they dropped 100 megaton. The Hiroshima bomb was 50 kilotons. And 1 megaton is 20 times the Hiroshima bomb. 1 megaton. This was 100 megatons. They got a big bomb, and nobody's ever dropped one that big since. The biggest now has been 10 megatons. So that was my experience with fallout. And it was all new. I mean, but how can you take a bucket of water and spread it so thin over all them acres? You couldn't do it. And I told my wife, while this is going on for the next two days, keep the kids inside, because it's all over. It's not just there; it's all over. It's all over the United States. Because every time that thing would encircle the Earth, and every day you'd get the air again. You'd get fall. Each time it'd be less, because it takes 10 half-lives to be 1/10 of 1%. So 1,000 now becomes 1, and 100 was the maximum. So, and we were getting 3,000 and 4,000. So 4,000 becomes 4. So it was safe after 10 half-lives. For iodine-131, that's gone. That's the principle. That's the majority of the short-lived. But the long term is 5.2 years. It could be 52 years before that joker's gone. And there's some of them that's 1,000 years. There's some of them that are never going to go away. But that was my experience with combustion. After that, I got assigned to the USS Sam Houston, my first nuclear submarine. And I joined the Houston. It was already in Scotland, in Holylock, Scotland, in the anchorage there, by a tender. And I was flown over, and I went aboard the Sam Houston 3 o'clock in the morning. And we left on Christmas Day of 1962 to go on patrol. And my first patrol was north of Murmansk, and we were up there for December, January, and February, and got back in late March. came back to Holy Lock, and then they fly us back home, and another crew takes over. The ship goes out again. That way they keep the subs on station all the time. Instead of traveling back and forth, using the time and using the energy up, they fly us back and forth. The Air Force would fly us back and forth in C-135s. They'd split the crew in 75 and 75. In case one went down, they don't lose the whole crew. Well, that gave you a comforting feeling too, you know. So I did time on there, and we had an incident on there where I can't go into great detail, but we had a nuclear incident where radiation was building up inside the hull, and I was a senior guy. It was my job. I'm responsible for this nuclear safety. It's my job to take care of the problem. And the captain asked me, we're on nuclear patrol, and we never, once you're on patrol, you never key any electronic equipment. No signal ever leaves that submarine because they can spot you. You never know where that guy is. And I said, Captain, you know, the way I see it, you got two choices. You can ignore the limit, which was, I forget, I think 200 microcuries. We were all, it was I was plotting it, and it was going up. Every day I'd, you know, move it a little bit further. I said, you can either ignore the limit and irradiate 135 guys, or you can break silence and snorkel to change the air. But snorkeling, you just change the air. You don't solve the real problem, because once you stop snorkeling, it's going to build up again. But we were within 5 days of the end of the patrol anyway. So he says, I said, the real problem, I got to find out where it's coming from. And he said, find it, quick. You know, that was my orders. So I got 16 nuclear missiles on there. We had nuclear torpedoes. We had nuclear, in some of the electronic equipment, you got heavy metal tubes, you know, like iridium and plutonium, you know, that put off radiation. And the thing is, when you go to sea in a nuclear submarine, you shut the hatch right off of the Clyde River, you dive, right off the Holy Lock, you dive, and you come back with the same air. You just keep cleaning it up. You never surface, you never change the air, you never do anything, we just keep it clean. And that was my job, to see that it was done. So I had to search and search, and I'm using everything I could do, everything I knew to do, and after a day and a half or so, I found where it was coming from. So it was coming from the missile compartment, which was highly suspectable, because that's where 16 missiles are. That's where the majority of nuclear power was. The nuclear power plant itself wasn't leaking, because you got like 18 inches of lead, and you're going to come through that. So I reported it to the engineer officer. I found it, and I had my Geiger counter. It's going wild. It's coming right from here. And he went and told the missile officer. The missile officer told the captain. The captain says, fix it. Well, that's the job of the missile people. So they pull a drape around that tube, and my engineer and me are standing there, and he says, get out. We're all clear for top secret. Get out. Need to know. It's not your job, you don't need to know. Get out. And even though you're cleared for top secret, they kicked us out. And I could hear they opened up the hatch of this missile tube, and I could hear clanging going on. And I would imagine, just a guess, it had to be a bad gasket, you know, because it didn't take them more than 10 minutes. And they shut the hatch and opened up the curtain. Come on back. Try that. And I put the guard counter, nothing.
Nothing.
That was it.
Wow.
So I saved that captain's butt, because the repercussions from that would be, if we had to come off a patrol, our missiles were destined to somewhere in Russia, more likely Moscow, that area. That means SAC bombers had to be redeployed from the mountain out there in Omaha, where the hell it is. Be a lot of things going on to change, to get them targets covered. And knocking on wood, I was lucky to find the problem. And again, nobody ever, all it says was, good job, to me, personally. And it would have been a hell of a mess if I hadn't found it. And if it had been me, with only 5 days on patrol, I would look at, what was the lesser of two evils? I would have irradiated 135 guys. It's better that 135 guys die than Moscow coming over here and bombing us, because you lose millions. That's what I would have done. Of course, I don't tell him that. He had to make the decision. But anyway, that was that. So I did 2 years, left that submarine, went to Sam Rayburn. I went from Sam Houston to Sam Rayburn. And I was on that for, in Newport News Shipyard, all through the building of that submarine. And the captain of that was a senior four-stripe captain in the submarine Navy. And he asked for one more assignment. That way it would ensure him to make an admiral. So he called all of the chief petty officers, which was me, maybe 10 or 12 of us, whatever, and all the officers, maybe 10 or 12 officers, maybe 20 of us all told. He says, we are here to build a submarine, the best one that's ever been built. He said, I don't want to hear about your dog, your cat, your car ran out of gas, your wife is sick. You're here to build my submarine, period. Get to it. And that was it. And so one chief, about 2 months later, something came up, and his check bounced or something, and the bank called, and he called the chief in, the chief petty officer said, what did I tell you when you, blah, 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 blah. He said, you're done, get off my submarine. And he transferred the guy. He threw him off the submarine. So you got multiple systems supporting that reactor, and they took and assigned everybody a system that they were building. I had two systems. It was my system. Anything that went on in that system that the yard did, I'm going to be there to watch it, and then die check it and check it for, you know what die checking is? You put gentian violet on a new weld, and it soaks in, and it just soaks in, and then you wipe it off. Then you put some kind of powder on it, and then the powder will draw the gentian violet back up, and it'll show up purple if it's not a good weld. And it can't have any purple whatsoever. And your father was a welder. He'd know what I'm talking about. Die checking. And every time they would die check a weld or anything, or pressure, put a pressure in that compartment, I would be there to be sure my system was right. And one system had 255 valves in it. One system. And we had multiple systems. Now, to be qualified in a submarine, I'm qualified to wear the silver dolphins. Once you qualify, until you're disqualified, they're for life. I'm still a qualified submarine sailor. And to be qualified, you have to know every valve in every compartment under any condition. It can be a collision, it can be fire, it can be smoke, gas, any problem. When the alarm goes off, and they sound some alarm, and you could be in any compartment, and you look around, if you're the senior guy, it's your job to take charge and handle the situation. And you must know what every valve is, what it does, where it is, and what to do in case of collision. And that's when you do that, they give you 9 months to learn that. And believe me, every day I did 8 hours of watch and 4 hours of learning. And he'll be talking to me, what's this valve? He puts his hand over it, you can't see what. Some of them are color-coded, some have got the name on it. You can't see what it is. That's CHV 55. What's it do? You got to tell him. When will you use it? And when he's satisfied that you know the submarine, then you're qualified. And it gives you a comforting feeling, because you can take the guy out of the radio room, and he can come back in my engine room and start the engines. I can go in the torpedo room. I can fire a torpedo. I can go in the periscope and raise the torpedo. I know how to operate the only thing that you did not learn to do was a TDC, the torpedo data computer. They only had 2 or 3 people, because this is the latest electronic equipment we had. You feed everything to it, and it tells you the direction to fire the torpedo. The TDC, the torpedo data computer, and that was top secret. but I knew what it was, I knew what it did, but I couldn't operate that. But that's what happens when you become a qualified submariner.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one last story I'll tell that sad, and then I'll conclude it. When time came to leave combustion as an instructor, like I said, I went to my sub, and a buddy of mine named Jim Peters, he got orders to go too. Well, his orders, excuse me, he went to Portsmouth, New Hampshire Navy Yard. And I went to, as I said, to Sam Houston. And I came off a patrol in March of '61. And, sorry, 63, I'll get it right. 63, March of '63. And the Thresher sank while I was in between patrols. Now Rickover is a no-frills guy, and everybody in the Navy hated him. They hated his guts. Electric Boat Army hated his guts. Newport News hated his guts because he cut right to the chase. You know, I don't want to talk about all that BS. I want this done now, and that's how he was. And he got things done because he was that kind of a guy. Well, he told the Navy, find where my sub is. Of course, they started looking, and the guy that found the Titanic,
Yep.
but all of his equipment to bear.
Submersible.
And they got a deep dive in submersible they can send down with lights and all that sends back pictures, and they found what was left of the Thresher. And my buddy Jim Peters, that was his submarine. He had been in the Navy 18 years. He wanted to be on sub, and he couldn't go on sub because his eyes were bad. When the old diesel Navy, everybody had to have 20/20 because you take turns standing lookouts topside with your glasses looking for aircraft that can bomb you. Nuclear subs unnecessary because you never surface. So there's no, they wavered his eyesight. So he said, I'm finally going to get to go on the submarine. I'm finally going to go to sea on a nuclear submarine. So Jim got his wish. He went to sea on a nuclear submarine, and he's still there. And him and 134 other guys, 135 guys went down. It was like 25 shipyard workers went down. They always take people out of each group in the shipyard to go in case something breaks, they can fix it. And also, it's to be sure when your group is working on it and you're going to go, you don't know who's going to go. You could be sure it's done right. That's the Navy's way. So what they found out, Ballard found it, and you would think it would be in one big piece or two pieces, whatever. It was scattered, and they took pictures. Within 2 weeks, Rickover had pictures in his hand. He said, dispense these to all my crews, and don't let this happen to any more submarines. And now they got to find out why it sank to prevent it from happening again. And from here on in, it's some things I can tell you and some I can't. Back in those days, the Russians had subs on our shore. We know that to be a fact. They were there, and they had what's called sonar buoys. They still got them. Now a helicopter can go out and drop a sonar buoy down by a line and listen to a submarine, and he can move. He could cover a vast area of the ocean. Well, they had these along the continental shelf, and what they did, every American submarine ran across that. And they took an electronic fingerprint of every submarine because they're every one different, just like a fingerprint. Mm-hmm. They're all similar, but they're all different in some way, and they could tell right away when a Russian was on our shore. And believe it or not, there was at least one Russian every week crossed that line. They were that close. Now, they found that they took the sonar buoys which are listening devices, and they monitored them, more than one. They monitored those sonar buoys, and they heard different sounds. And knowing what caused different sounds, they know what made that sound. And I have to stop and think, you know, I don't want to get into areas, bad area. What they came up with from the sonar buoys, they first heard a garbled message, says from the captain, experiencing minor difficulty, have positive up angle. That was its entire message. Then it was garbled. Then they heard high pressure screeching, which was 5,000 pound air blowing the ballast tanks. He was trying to blow the ballast tanks. Now he was at test depth and no power, because what they were doing, all new submarines, you go down 100 foot at a time till you hit the test depth to see if you can do it. You know, you got to test it out. It's like an airplane. Does it fly? You got to fly. And they were at test depth, and you're dead in the water. If they had had underwater, under motion, they may have been able to plane to the surface. They heard high pressure air. He's attempting to, he said, I have positive up angle, attempting to blow. After 30-some seconds, the screeching stopped. Sometime later, it was a minute or more later, it started again and ran for a short time, 7 or 8 seconds, and stopped again. Nothing. Then you hear 4 big bang, bang, real hard bang, bang, 4 of them. What was that? When the nuclear reactor is running, you got 2 speeds, low speed and high speed. When you shift to maximum propeller speed, you have to shift the pumps into high speed, and they draw, I mean, like 360 amps apiece. There's 4 of them, and when those breakers drop out, it's like an airplane crashing. It makes a hell of a bang. Big, you know what a knife blade is. Imagine that big knife blade banging, and it's 4 bang bang. What does that mean? The reactor just shut down. They lost the reactor because it shifts from high speed to low speed and it's kicked out. What does that mean? Reactor, they call it a scram. The reactor would scram on its own if anything went wrong to protect the reactor. And something went wrong to shut the reactor down. The reactor startup procedure was such, when time didn't matter, was to slow to protect the reactor. You know, caution, caution, caution. Raise the rods out, 4 banks of rods. Raise one bank very slowly, and then maybe the second bank very slowly. Took time, which they didn't have. And in the meantime, they're following her by pinging, and she's passing 1,000, 1,200, down, 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 down. She gets to test depth, kept on going, kept on going, and kept on going, and down to some pressure, which I can't say. They hear this horrible, horrible noise, and that was the death of the thresher. And what you would think, well, it crushed. It didn't crush. Didn't crush. When they blew the ballast tanks, the forward bow of the ship, the tanks blew, so it was positive buoyancy. The stern was flooding through a seawater line 4 inches in diameter. That's 16 times the size of a fire hose with 2 to 3 times the pressure coming in on you. And you're getting like 3 or 4 tons of water every minute. And it don't take long before you've lost positive buoyancy. So the bow was positive, the stern was negative. And it's slowly going down backwards. And slowly they think it broke in half. Why do they say that? All the pictures that we saw that was consumable was scorched. Not scorched, but like you substitute the heat, it turns tan, brownish, browns off. The edges were brown and some of them would crinkle up. High temperature, so something caused that to see high temperature. What could have caused it? When it broke in half, the stern was already flooded. The bow now is like a big tube, and the water under that pressure I talked about compressed. When you compressed air, it heated up. And those guys, thank God, they died quick. And the worst part is waiting to die.
Yeah.
And I put myself there so many times. And I thought, oh God, what pain that had to be. And never saw a body. We saw pictures. Never saw a body. We saw shoes and clothing and metal. It's like, I can best describe it. When that hull filled up with water, you drop a cannonball in the water, you think it's going to float down like a feather. It doesn't. A cannonball will eventually, if it's deep enough, attain the same velocity as if you drop it in the air. Not quite as much. And that's roughly 100 miles an hour is the fastest the thing will fall. It's 32 feet per second is gravity. And they were at thousands of feet. Plenty of time for that cannonball to gain momentum. And they figured when it filled up with water, it didn't crush. Because it's much pressure inside as outside, same pressure. Didn't crush. Now, it's because of the configuration of the hull, it's like it's going down on an angle. And it looked to me, I've seen airplane crashes, and it just smears the runway for 1,000 yards. It's like 40 feet wide, as far as you can see. That's what we saw, the remains of the Thresher. Just pieces and pieces and pieces. And the only thing that was recognizable, that you could say definitely what it was a part of the sail, because the sail is free floating. You got the conning tower inside of it, but the sail outside is not. It can flood between the two, and that part, about 2/3 of it came down as one piece, and it was just, I could just picture that submarine just tumbling and tumbling and tumbling and tumbling, and they estimate it must have been doing something close to 100 miles an hour. Now, there's people that dispute what they say, because whatever finds you have, somebody said, no, I don't believe that happened. I think the Russians did it. I think they hit something. That wasn't true. All those noises, nothing else would give you the noises that they heard. And I can't swear that what's happened. Nobody can say that's what happened. But in the engine room, where I stood my watches, I was an engineman. I stood my watches in the engine. I had my office there. I did my contamination study, everything there. I did all the stuff there. And it was a high-rating time, because I was between patrols, and we're going to go back on patrol in 2 weeks. And the captain called us all together and said, anybody here don't want to go back, you're free to stay. We don't want you, if you don't want to be there, we don't want you, please. We don't want you to be thinking about something else, worrying about something else. Not one person left. And eventually, Submarines Atlantic and Subpac, Sub-Pacific, from Washington put out a memo, and all hands memo to submarine service. Anyone, land or sea, involved in submarines don't want to be there, let us know, and we'll transfer you. And only 5 or 6 guys, which were all land-based, left. Why land-based, I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's what I heard. 5 or 6 guys did leave the service. But when we went back to sea that first time, and anything that you don't want to happen, don't want to happen, you don't talk about it. If something's going to happen, you don't even mention it. You don't want anybody to know that you're thinking about it. But damn well they're all thinking about the Thresher. And I went down in the engine part of the pipe that probably was the one that ruptured. And it's directly beneath the reactor control panel. And it sprayed that reactor, and the reactor shut down because it's to protect itself. And they could not start the reactor back up because it was spraying. And she said, why didn't the guy shut the valve? At 3 times the fire hose, you can't even stand the fire hose. At 16 times its volume, if it didn't kill you, you're incapacitated. He couldn't shut the valve. There's a valve there, but he couldn't shut the valve. And the valve never got shut. And I went there so many times, and I would, in my mind, I'd trace that system out every day. To be sure, I know where them valves, but you never send it to nobody. And when we got done, everybody breathed a sigh of relief. And I think about Jim Peters. I had 9 friends on there, and I got a book. I'll show you the book after. I wrote my Navy life, and I got pictures of 6 of them, 6 of my buddies, and they decided to redo what they call sub-safe. Now, the second sub I went to, the one was being built, was at the point of construction that they could make changes without undoing something that was already done. Other subs were too far along to make changes. So we were the first sub to get the new apparatus that they call fail-safe. And that had to do with faster reactor startup, give you more time, cuts the time in half. Instead of testing this test at dead still, you do it at standard speed, making 12 knots. You can plane to the surface. And I didn't cover why the air blow stopped blowing the tanks. They ran tests and found out a continuous long blow, the air has to come from this manifold, goes all the way back. It has to go 200 feet each way. It has to travel 400 feet to get to where the tank is going to blow, in the bow or the stern. And it goes through needle valves. Some places, well, they're needle valves. They're big needles, but they're needle valves. They froze up because when you release air, it chills the air, and it froze. They had a freeze blockage, and it blew. It unblocked because it hadn't froze hard yet, and blew another 5 or 6, 7, 10 seconds, but refroze the second time forever. So now they changed that too. Now, if you want to blow the tanks in the rear, the tanks that hold that 5,000-pound air are in that tank, and they're like big cylinders, like you see, gas cylinders. Only they're 18 foot tall and they're 4.5 foot in diameter. 5,000 pounds of air. That's a lot of pressure. And what they did, I can tell you this. They before, when the guy at the manifold would blow a tank, it's got to come from that valve, from that tank, through lines to his manifold and redirect to wherever he directs it, which is going back to the same tank that's in. Well, why have it come up here to the manifold to go back to the same tank? They put a system in where when he blows them tanks, that tank blows that cylinder blows that tank. It ain't got to travel nowhere, and it comes not through a needle valve, but it comes through like a 4-inch line. Now, the first time ever it was done, the USS Sam Rayburn, we did it, and Rick Over was aboard. I admire that guy. I admire him no end. And we went down and duplicated the thresher's exact motions. No headway, just what she did, just to test the blow. And they said, Admiral, we're ready for the fast recovery, the fast blow. He said, do it. And when they hit that, it was like 4 tank trucks hitting you all at one time. That submarine shook like 2 big giant hands playing dominoes. And that thing just shook and shook. And the depth gauge, I went in the missile compartment to watch the depth gauge, and it went from this thousand, it went blah, 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 and it was flying. And we came out of the water for more than 2/3 of the hull, and that thing weighs 7,000 tons. 2/3 of the hull came out of the water, and she settled back down, and we went back down to 300 feet, because of the weight. And
wow.
That was to test the fast blow. And then around the same time, we tested the fast reactor recovery. Now, Rick Over is a guy that always, he would interview a person and cut the legs off your chair so it'd make you unsteady, and you'd to get you upset. He would do things that you wouldn't know what he was doing. He never had a drill. He would do the real thing. And to make this fast reactor recovery, to cut the reactor recovery time in half, 4 banks of reactor rods. You pull one rod at a time at a real slow pace. Then you pull the second one, and sometimes you go critical. As time goes by, the reactor gets critical, gets spent. You're on the 3rd bank, and eventually you go to the 4th bank. So, if you go too fast, you can burn out the fuel plates and ruin the reactor, and it's done. I mean, you got to come in court and have a whole new reactor put in. So they cut the time down by half, and what they did. Let's see, what can I say? They speeded it up. I'll just say they speeded up the startup time. And a chief petty officer, that's his station. He's the guy that controls the reactor. But you got to control. That guy controls the reactor. You got another guy over here. You got 3 guys and an officer overseeing. He's the reactor operator, officer. And they said to the Admiral, we're ready for a fast reactor recovery. And he said to the reactor officer, you just drop dead, get the hell out of here. Get out of here. now it all dumps to this chief. He said, do it. And the guy's name was Kuzik. He was the guy from Boston. And he did it. He did all he's supposed to do. And we recovered. It took about 15 minutes before the, give or take a few, I can't remember exactly, before the thresher broke up. And if they had had any one or two of them things together, they would have made it.
Yeah.
But after they do that, to see if they damage the fuel plates, we have to run an iodine sample analysis. That was my job as a chemist. I was a ship's chemist, to run an iodine analysis to see if any of the plates had disintegrated. And I ran an iodine analysis. It was background. So I reported to the captain. He reported to the admiral. It's all good. So from that point on, all new submarines had fail-safe, but we were the first ones to do it with Rickover's supervision. And this country, people don't even heard of Rickover's name. It's like Churchill said, never has so many owed so much to so few as to the Royal Air Force. Never has so many owed so much to so few as to one man as Rickover, because he fought for them and to fight, and he'd come to EB, and they would hate to see him come, and all the captains too, because he'd come down like one time. One more last thing, he's coming to visit us while we were being built, and he was hot on chemistry. That was my job, and boy, I was right on. I had it done like right on the money it was supposed to be. And the first thing he would look at is the chemistry log and see if everything was up to date. And he liked grapes, and the captain knew this. He liked seedless grapes. And this is a true story. And the captain says to the supply officer, go over in town in Newport News and get us a case of seedless grapes. Went over in town, he couldn't find no seedless grapes. So he said, I got to take something back. So he bought back 2 cases of grapes with seeds in them. Instead of quantity, instead of quality, he bought back quantity. Instead of 1, he bought 2. So now you're trying to do good with the admiral. They bring Rick overboard and bring him down to the wardroom. And the first thing the captain asks, "Can I get you anything, Admiral? Do you like something?" "Well, I don't. Well, can I get you something to eat?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "What do you want?" He thought he'd say grapes. He said, "Get me fresh pineapple." He said, I'm sorry, we don't have. He said, "What the hell do you ask me what I want for? Give me what you got. Give me what you got." "What do you got?" He said, "We got some grapes. Give me some grapes." And so the steward brings a bunch of grapes out, and it's these purple grapes with seeds in them. And he starts eating them. And he starts spitting the seeds up. And the captain says to the steward, "Get the captain a bowl full of seeds." So he never said about it. But he would do unsuspecting things. He would come in the control room and be talking to you, and there was a manual control to shut the reactor down on the panel. And he'd be talking, he'd just reach over and shut it down. pow, and he'd say, the left side is out of commission, do the right side. And then you got to shift, oh man, he didn't go through drills. It was a real McCoy. And he was and nobody knows how much they owe that guy. And people even today that's 40 years old don't even know who the hell Rickover is. And he was passed over. He was a father of the nuclear navy. He was acknowledged as the father of the nuclear navy. And when he was up for a two-star admiral, he was a four-stripe captain. He was passed over 3 times. 3 times you're out of the Navy. That's how they get the best guys. You know, they pass you over after 3 times. And Congress said, he's the father of nuclear navy, and you've passed him over, and because he's Jewish. No, it's not because he was. Obviously, it was. He was Jewish, and they passed him over because he was Jewish. And an act of Congress. Check. I'm not no bullshit. By act of Congress, he was given 2 stars unanimously by act of Congress. All 1,000 guys, whatever's there, gave him 2 stars. Times come for 3 stars, and 4, same thing. He was passed over again. And he was given 4 stars by act of Congress. And he hated the uniform because the Navy hated him. And everywhere he went, he used to wear a blue tacky suit. And he'd come aboard, and he got to get in uniform on the ship. And he would tell the captain, "Get me a uniform." Well, the captain would look around, and he'd tell the steward, he'd tell an engineer, "Get the captain uniform." And you go back in the engine room, and whoever was the admiral's son, get us on a cake and give him to the admiral. And you never got it again. You never got it back. So nobody knows what they owe Rickover. And he retired from the military at the age of either 60 or 62, I forget what it is. It may be changed now. But it used to be like civilian airlines, it was 62. And act of Congress, they kept holding him over all the way until Ronald Reagan was president, until 1982. And he was born, he was 82 years old, and he did 60 years. He was 22 years old when he got in the Navy. He did 60 years in the military. He was 82 when they finally got rid of him. And Reagan finally convinced him, he could barely get up and down them hatches, but he still went. And every submarine ever made by us up to that time, he wrote it for the first dives. He didn't say, "Go take her out." He said, "Come on, guys, we'll take her out." You admire a guy like that, you'll follow him anywhere. And I really like that guy.
Yeah.
And the only time I ever had any words with him, when I was doing a sample one time off the reactor, which is thousands of pounds of pressure at hundreds of degrees of heat, way above 212. And it's a tricky situation, and he knew it. And all he said was, "Good morning, Chief." I said, "Good morning, Admiral." I'm saying, don't stop, keep going. Don't bother me. And he kept on going. So that's the story of the Thresher.
All right.
And since the Thresher, there's been no ship sunk since the Thresher. They've lost a total of 4 ships since World War II till the 1968. They did lose the Scorpion. They lost 4 ships between 45 and 68. They lost nothing since then. Fail-safe is working.
That's great.
And extensive training. And I've got a lot of shipmates that, like I say, I'm the senior guy, and I'm the oldest guy now. And one day it'll be my honor, I hope, to see all those guys again.
Yep.
In the big happy submarine up in the sky.
Amen. Amen.
Into my story. After the Half-Beak, USS Half-Beak, 352, I got shore duty in Annapolis, Maryland. I wasn't at the academy. I was across the river from the academy. We supported the academy. We trained the midshipmen in ship handling. And while I was there, one of the midshipmen was John S. McCain, the third, the guy that just died.
Yeah.
He was an 18-year-old kid. I didn't know him personally, but he went through our training. But I was there for 3 years, and after that I came back to New London to the USS Croker, SS 246, and I spent most all of 1958 at sea. I was gone most all the time at sea, and 59 came. While I was in Annapolis, the biggest event that happened while I was there, I met this young lady one night. I was in my favorite bar, having my favorite drink, which was draft beer, and 6 ladies came in and sat down at the opposite end of the bar near the door with their bowling bags. And I'd been there since 5 o'clock. It was now 9. I'd had a few beers under my belt, and a couple of my buddies says, you ain't got the nerve to go over and kiss all 6 of them girls. I said, hell, that ain't no challenge at all. I picked up my beer and walked over there, and I got to the first lady. I said, look, I got a bet. A beer is riding on this. I got to kiss all 6 of you girls, so go with the flow. She said, okay. So I worked my way through all of them. I got to number 5. I did her. I got to number 6. That was this lady. She said, don't touch me. That was my wife. That, you know, she wasn't my wife then. I said, you don't understand this. I don't care. Don't touch me. So and that was her. So I went back to my buddies and he said, we're going to give you the beer anyhow because you did kiss 5 of them. So I didn't know how often she bowled, but I used to go in that bar 3 or 4 times a week. So I thought maybe I'll bump into her again. And by chance, about a month or so later, I did. And I was in civilian clothes this time. And I had on a yellow shirt, and she loved yellow, which I didn't know. So right away, I was making points. And I said, I want to apologize if I said something out of the way last time. She said, no, it was all right. I said, I don't suppose if I ask you if you would go with me to a movie or a supper that you'd go. She says, I might. She said, we'll see. And then time goes by, and the 3rd time, I said, would you go to supper with me? She says, yes. So we went out, and I found out she loved dancing. And she said to me, you dance? I said, yes, I dance. So we went to a place in suburban Baltimore. I can't remember the name of the place, but we went there, and I danced. And she says, you call what you do dancing? You know, most guys, they do something, they call it dancing.
How old were you at this point?
I was about 29, 30, I guess.
Okay.
And no, about 28, I guess. So she said, let me teach you how to do the 2-step, the foxtrot. So she taught me. I thought, oh my, this is so much easier and simpler. And then she taught me the waltz, and she taught me the polka, and taught me how, you know, I was never proficient at it, but at least I could do it. So after about 6 months of this, I thought, I believe I'm in love with that woman, but I don't want to tell her because she'll think just another sailor trying to make out with her, and I didn't want to lose her. So I said, you know, I don't know. I said, but I think I'm falling in love with you. I think. She says, I'm glad to hear that. She says, because I think I'm falling in love with you too. I said, I'm glad to hear that because we're both on the same note now. You know, we're both traveling the same road. And she says, I said, can you give me some of your background? She says, I'm married, but I'm in the process of getting a divorce. I've got 4 children. She says, and my children come first. I said, in my mind, I said, that was good. They made a good point with me because I thought, here's a woman that she's not going to ignore her children for me. She's going to, you know, no matter what, her children are her first thing in mind. So that made a big point with me. That told me the kind of person she was. You know, she stays with it. So anyhow, she was getting a divorce. And when she divorced, a year or so, whenever the final decree comes in, because Maryland had some crazy laws at that time. So I come back to New London. I was gone most of 58 to sea. So come 59, I got duty in the Philadelphia Navy Yard in the Croker for 3 months. And while there, I used to travel from Philadelphia to Baltimore on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I got to where I knew her really good. I said, you know, when is divorce? She says, whenever the lawyer calls. Well, in the summer and the spring of 59, I was on leave. I took 10 days leave, and I'm on leave to Baltimore. She's got the 6 kids and the 4 kids, and we all got along good, you know. And brother, she had 5 or 6 brothers and sisters. We all, mother and father, everybody liked me. So appeared to like me. So, what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought.
You were on a 10-day leave.
10-day leave. So while I was on 10-day leave, the phone rang. It was a lawyer. She says, Mrs. McManus, I'm happy to tell you your divorce just came through. She says, your papers are here ready to be picked up. She says, this was on a Saturday morning. She says, are you open? She says, I've opened open till noontime. It was 10 o'clock. I said, wow, if we rush it, we can get up today. So we jumped in my car. I had a 56 beautiful two-tone Oldsmobile Holiday.
Oh, wow.
No middle post, beautiful car. And we drove to Baltimore, found his office, got the papers, she signed for him, and then three windows away was a marriage license. I said, well, we're here, why don't we get the marriage license too? Went over there, he said, no, there's a 3-day waiting period, unless you're a serviceman on leave. I said, by God, I just happened to be me, you know. And I showed him my leave paper, and he said, well, I'll give them to you right now. So, yeah, so I got the marriage license. That was 10 o'clock in the morning when she got the divorce. So we got back to her house, and told all the kids. And I said, we're getting married today. And I said, let me call my mother and father. They had a flower shop over in Salisbury, about an hour ride away, 80 miles, hour and a half, 80 miles, hour and a half miles away. Let me call my mother and father and tell them, come on over tonight. We're going to get married tonight. So they said, well, they work till 6 o'clock, so we can't get there before 9:30. We'll wait. So we waited, and they got there, and we were married at 10 o'clock that night. So she was single from 10 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. She was single. And all the kids went for it. They were all for it. So I never looked down at the kids. I always treated them with respect. And they, like she said, they came first, but she never ignored me in the meantime. She was a great cook. I mean, a great cook, beautiful housekeeper. The house was always clean. And by God, in 11 or 12 months later, here comes my first son, Bobby. It was right across the street, in that big house right there. That's his house. He came along, and named him Robert. And he was a joy in our life. I mean, and all of her brothers and sisters, she was 36 at the time when we got married. I was 30, she was 36. Said, why do you, at your age, you're now 30, 37, why do you have children this age? She said, it wouldn't be fair to my husband not to give him kids if he wants them. So she says, I'm going to give him kids if he wants. So that's why we had Bobby. She even though kids were first, she never ignored my thoughts too. So, and I said, it'd be nice to have a boy and a girl. And I said, then we'll be all done. So a year later 2 years later, we had Janice. And she lives over in, near the main fish market now. So we had the 2 kids for her, plus the 4. In the meantime, the oldest girl was 16 when we got married. Now she's got a boyfriend, and my wife Helen was the guy with the arrow. What do you call it?
Oh, Cupid. Cupid.
She was Cupid for him, because Judy asked her, "Isn't there any nice guys down where you work?" She said, "There's a couple." She said, "One very nice guy," and she says, "I'll introduce you." So she told Wayne, "My daughter wants to meet you." And he thought, "Oh, geez, here comes a dog. She's trying to unload this dog on me." And he said, "Oh, Judy, come in," because she was a good-looking young lady. And so they got married just 5 months after we did. Because she was now 17 and he was 19, I guess. 2 years old difference. And we had Bobby, and by God, 5 months later, they had a boy. And he did 34 years with in the National Security Agency, this big time spy group. And he did all kinds of crap, let me tell you. And he's retired too now. He lives in Baltimore. But going back to my wife, I'd come home. In the meantime, I got duty back here. I got duty in combustion engineering. I asked for nuclear power school. I want to go to nuclear power. And I got 6 months training in 6 months schooling in New London, and 6 months to a prototype. And the nearest one was combustion. Well, I was in the top 24%, so I got to select what I wanted. And I asked for combustion, which was in Windsor, out in the middle of the tobacco fields.
Yeah.
Long before the dual highways, what you see now. Nobody was out there but the tobacco fields. And I'm looking around. I did 6 months training, on a prototype. And when I got done, because I did fairly well, they selected me again to be an instructor there, to teach the oncoming guys. So I thought, man, I'm going to be here for another 2 years, 2.5 years. I might as well buy a house and live here, instead of paying rent. So I looked around, I looked in Windsor, I looked in South Windsor, Agawam, and Simsbury, and all around. And I like this town the best. And I saw this house, and it just clicked. Everything just clicked. I like this. It's near where I work, convenient.
Yeah.
And schooling was good. I neighbor next door. I talked to her. Good school and all, and everybody here. All the houses were new. This whole section was called North something. That's after North Street.
Yeah.
That was the name that they gave to this conglomerate of houses. And everybody here was new and just fresh out of the military.
Yeah.
This guy was Navy, that guy was Air Force, this guy was Navy, and this guy was Army, and we all had something in common. So it was a good group. And we had a great, great time. And we had a lot of parties, and I would come home and work, and always amazed me. My wife always had the house was, when I come home at 5 o'clock, or whatever time I come home, the house was clean, supper was ready, the kids were clean and cleaned up and clean clothes on, and she was always with a smile. I mean, she was always top of the notch. To that day, to this, she still is top of the notch. She can't do as much, but I love her just as much now as I did before. Maybe even more so now, because I've had 61 years training. So the kids all love me, and they all went their own way, and all 6 kids now are grandparents, and they all got multiple kids, so we're great grandparents. And last month, September 19th, the boy died. Stepson died. Donald died. And he had smoked for 55 years. And it didn't surprise me, but it did come as a shock, because you're never ready for death. And when they said they were calling hospice in, I knew the end was close. And I tried to soften it for her, but nothing I could say would do it. So I think he lived 2 days with hospice, and he died. Nice guy, and he was with NSA for a lot of years, and he went to Europe. He's been in over 100 different countries. I mean, you name it. He's been all over South America, Brazil, and Buenos Aires, and Rio. He's been all over Europe. He's been to Australia. He's been everywhere but the Antarctic, I think, and that's the only continent he hasn't been on. Been Asia, Japan, all the towns in China and Japan. I never even heard of him. He's been all over, but he smoked for 55 years, and he tried to knock that habit. And it took him 5 years. He tried everything in the world to kick the habit, and even tried hypnotism. And he finally got cured, but he died. So we bought this house. We loved it, and we bought this house in November the 20th of 1960, and moved in. And it took all my money that I had, all my reserve money for the closing costs, which I didn't know about closing costs, and didn't have any money for curtains or rugs. So that's November. It's getting cold. No rugs and curtains, and with little kids. I mean, young kids. And that winter, in December, it set the all-time record for cold in Windsor Locks. It went to 26 degrees below zero right here in Windsor Locks, and it was there for 3 or 4 days in a row. And for 2 weeks in a row, it went back and forth between 0 and -15. It never got higher than 0. Between 0 and -15 for 2 weeks. And I thought, what am I doing in here? I'm from Virginia. It's not supposed to be like this. But what I was worried about my furnace ran constantly, 24 hours a day, never shut down because my heat loss was greater than what it could put out. And the house never got hotter than 67 degrees. So we had on coats. And I thought, what am I going to do if the furnace quits? Because I didn't know anybody. There was no programs like now that you can go to for help. You know, like they feed you and clothing. I thought, well, what am I going to do? And I was worried to death. God, let me get through this in one piece. So we made it through. And in the meantime, I met people, and I joined the VFW and the American Legion, and I used to go to those pretty, not often, but once in a while. And I met people there, and then she met a lot of neighbors, and we had parties, and it was a great time in Windsor Locks. And they gave me a tax break, you know, for being a veteran, which was nice. And everybody I came in contact with, the town clerk I had in the business now, they were very helpful. The mayor at that time was nice, and I was here when the lady governor, Grasso, you see her downtown. She had on plain old clothes, with her glasses we stuck back on her head. It looked like she hadn't combed her hair for a week. We knew Ella Grasso as she really was, not as you see her on TV. And it was, I thought, you know, this is a down-to-earth, regular bunch of people. And that's what I liked for Virginia. They were all just down-to-earth people. It was a little colder here than Virginia, but I really liked the area. So that's how come I bought the house, and I've never been sorry from that day to this. I did all my own building here. I rewired a lot of things. I added the garage. I put that breezeway on, that back room there. I did all that work. And my wife helped me put wall boarding on because it's hard handling a big piece of wall board. But she did it. And I couldn't have done it without her. She was right there with me, getting dirty. And then when it came time to put the trim, and I thought, boy, it's going to be a job painting all that trim around all them windows. She said, why don't you paint it before you put it up? What a wonderful idea. So I would cut it to the right dimensions, and the floor wasn't yet done. And I'd leave it on the floor, and it wasn't painted, it was stained. And I said, and she would stain it, and she would stain them, and I gave it all day to be dry. I'd come home at night, it's all ready to go up. It's cut. It's ready to fit, and it's stained. I put it in place, and it was done. It was done, and I could not have done it without her. And she was always willing to help. Anything that I would do, give me a hand, she was right there to help. And the kids, too. The kids were all, one of them now lives in Vermont, Delaware, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Florida. They're all over, they're scattered. But we get together at least once a year on her every 5-year birth, 7, 70, 75, 80, 95. They said, we'll see you when you're 100. Well, she's 98 years old now.
God bless.
98 in two months. So we won't get together this year, you know, at all because of the virus. But she's been an inspiration to me, and she still is. And I couldn't have done any of it without her.
Stu, that was just beautiful. We have to meet Helen.
Oh, here she is now. Hey, Helen, come on in and sit down and get your picture taken. Sit this for a spell. I know you got things to do, but I've been telling Bill how bad you've been treating me.
Oh, really?
Sit down here beside me. She's the apple of my eye. She's an inspiration. She's my heartthrob. She is everything. And I could have done none of it without her. And she's just as pretty now to me as she was when she was 36.
Beautiful.
When I first met her. Right?
Right.
And she does anything she can for me. Of course, at our age, we can't do as much for each other as we used to. But we still love each other.
Yeah.
And every night, without fail, I have to rub her back and legs with biofreeze for pain. And I see her to bed, and she goes to bed about 9 o'clock, 9:30, and I see her, she gets in, help her get in bed, pulls the covers up, and then the last thing I do before I turn the lights on is, I love you. And a couple people say, why do you tell her that every night? I said, because the last thing on this earth I want her to hear is for me to tell her, I love you.
That's beautiful.
And I do.
That's beautiful.
I love you.
I couldn't have done it without her.
Why don't you share with us some of your hobbies and interests that maybe the both of you share or enjoy?
Well, lately we haven't had any because we haven't been anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we all know that.
We used to like to bowl.
Bowling, dancing.
Yeah, dancing.
Well,
We
she
used to
loves
love
dancing.
to dance.
She loves dancing.
I think that's where it all started, didn't it?
It-
Bowling and
She taught me-
dancing?
yeah, bowling. That's right. She taught me to dance. She said, "You call that dancing? What you would do?" Well,
Oh, I was so tired trying to dance with him because he wasn't dancing.
when we were in Mississippi visiting one of her brothers who worked for NASA down there, they had a big party one night, and he welcomed us. My sister and brother-in-law from Connecticut welcomed Stu and Helen, and everybody, about 100 people there. And this one guy was putting it on for free. And they were dancing, and finally they play a polka, and nobody's dancing. And I'm looking around, I look at my brother-in-law, he's what? They're expecting us to dance the polka. And I'm not good at this, I can do it, but I said, Jesus, we got to dance the polka. So we got up, we
And you did fine.
we put on a struggle. We struggled through a dance of the polka
Yeah.
to put on it for 100 people, right? So
That was my brother.
that was her brother. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was one of 5 people at NASA had a big thing for back in the middle 90s. They honored five people, and her brother Nick was one of the 5.
Wow.
He was big. He was in on the moonshot. He was in on all of it. He worked for Glenn L. Martin in Baltimore, and when they went to the missiles, nobody wanted to go because they're all married, living in Baltimore. But he was just divorced. He just divorced, or he was in the process of divorce, getting rid of Kay, the wildcat that he was married to, and he was happy to get away from Baltimore. So he went, and he never had more a 5th grade education, but
my.
he was in quality control, and that's in that area you can advance without a lot of school booking.
Yeah.
And he advanced right up to manager,
Wow.
and he did good.
So did he have to move down to Florida for the
He
NASA?
he moved.
Yeah.
He was in Cape Canaveral for years, and the first time I was in Cape Canaveral, it was a two-lane paved road with sand blowing across it. NASA dual highway with lights and all, and Cocoa Beach. It's big, and he went on from there to another stage of NASA in Mississippi. How he happened to be there on the Mississippi-Louisiana line? They have a facility, and they make the missile. They make the missiles in Martin Marietta, and I think St. Louis is where they make them. And they float them down by barge down the Mississippi, and they come out of the Mississippi, and right there is Mississippi, and they take them to that facility, and they bolt them down somehow to this big facility, and they light the engines off and run them full power to test them to be sure that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And he was there, and they make a hell of a lot of noise. And they swear in the boonies. Nothing of them. What is them? What's them thing we see along the highway? You run over them.
Oh, armadillos.
Armadillo all over
yeah.
the place.
Yeah.
Armadillos all
Armadillos
over. They're
everywhere.
like squirrels.
Yeah.
And armadillo all over, and just him and armadillos. And that's he finally retired.
Yeah.
And some years later, they honored 5. I don't know what they call them, old timers, first timers, and he was one of the 5,
Yeah.
and that was quite the honor.
Yeah.
They honored him.
So just a couple of questions I'm curious about with living in Windsor Locks back in the early 60s. You mentioned you belonged to the VFW and the American Legion. Now, I think they had dances, didn't they? And
Yes. Oh,
gatherings
yes,
and
yes.
Oh,
parties.
we used to go.
Yeah,
all-
Used to go to those.
We went to them. Yeah,
We went to
Yeah.
everything. that
every
they
dance.
had.
We went to a lot of dances. We followed one band around. Gentile.
Oh,
I forget his first name.
Bob?
Not Bob.
No, Jim Gentile was a ball player. Last name was
Bobby Gentile, I think.
something Gentile, and we went all over the place to follow him. And one New Year's, us and the neighbors went up to Sturgis. He was up there New Year's Eve. We went up there and danced
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
to
Yeah.
I can't remember his first name. anyway, we had
We
a
just followed them around.
lot of friends, a lot
Really?
of friends.
Groupies.
All across the street, we knew everybody.
Yeah.
Knew everybody. Now all those people have died, and new people moved in.
Yeah.
I don't know many people past the second or third house anymore because we don't get out anymore. There's nothing to do anymore. So we've sort of.
Now, did your youngest children go to Windsor Lock schools?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
3 of them.
Three of
She, when time came to get close to retirement, Social Security, I said, we got to check and see how much time you lack before you're eligible for Social Security. So I contacted Baltimore, and they sent back she needs 9 months, 3/4 to have full 10 years. I said, okay to her. I said, okay, get a job, any job doing anything, anywhere for 9 months to be eligible. So 2 doors down, North Street School,
Yeah.
they needed somebody to cashier. And she went down and applied, and they gave her a job as cashiering. And it was a Social Security job. And 9 months came and went. She was there 27 years.
I forgot.
I saw kids come and
27
go.
years.
Sure.
But
And
she,
you'd say, "Are you still here, Mrs. Sturgis?"
she loved the job. She loved it. She
The
loved
commute
it.
wasn't bad, was it?
No.
The commute.
Oh,
Yeah.
the commute was
The
wonderful.
commute.
What was
You
nice
didn't
about
have
it,
to have fancy clothes or
Yeah.
anything.
what was really good about it, Bill, she could get the kids off to school in the morning, see them off,
Yeah.
and she'd go to work at 10 o'clock, and 2 o'clock she'd be home, and when they came home from school, she was
They
here.
were never,
They were never
alone.
without her,
Yeah.
her tutelage, her oversee.
That's nice.
So it was wonderful. It just worked out good.
Yeah.
So one day we were talking, a bunch of us, about working, and when you think of work, you think of a 9 to 5 job. I don't know why, but that came to my mind.
Yeah.
I said, my wife has never had a working day in her life.
I,
What do you think 27 years at North Street School was? Oh, well, I forgot about that. But, it all worked out.
That's wonderful.
yeah, 3 of the children went to Windsor Lock schools.
High school as well?
The 3 youngest ones.
Yeah. North Street
Yeah. And high school,
and the high
middle
school.
school.
Middle school. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were in the class of 68. Sharon was in class of 68. Bobby was in class of 78. Janice was in class of 80
Yeah.
from Windsor Locks High School. Yes.
But it worked out wonderful.
Okay.
Well, that's all. I think that's all the compliments I can give you for now.
Well, is there anything else you wanted to cover, Stu or Helen? Anything else you'd like to talk about?
I can't think of anything else.
Well,
Okay.
she had a mini stroke a couple of years ago, and it's kind of left her. Sometimes she draws a total blank. I mean, it's not Alzheimer's. It's similar, but it comes and goes. And sometimes I can tell her something, and 2 minutes later she don't know what I said.
Well,
But she can't help it. Just like I can. I'm going blind and she's going deaf. So together we make one good person. What can you say? So we help each other.
Yeah.
She's my eyes and I'm her ears.
great.
So we make a good combo. And we've never had a serious fight. We made up a mind years ago. We first got married. And first, let me say, I saw a lot of infidelity in the military. A lot of that goes on because opportunity is there. I said, I'm going to have no part of that. And I never once strayed from the path, and neither did she once. And I said, what can we do to help ensure our marriage lasts long? Never go to bed mad. Never carry a grudge. We have spats like anybody else, and sometimes yelling and screaming, but 20 minutes later, I'm giving her a hug and a kiss. It's gone. Whatever it was nothing. It's gone. And that's what kept us together, I believe.
Well, Stu and Helen, this has been great. I can't thank you enough for the invaluable contribution you've made to those who will be meeting you through this video. You both are an inspiration and a joy to be around. Thank you.
Thank you.